Charles, longtime friend, big year for you, bud. Hosting and putting together one of the biggest real estate wholesaling events ever. Wholesaling, LSU football winning the national championship. Big year for you, man. I'm happy to have you on the show here, and also just your involvement more recently with the Fire Yourself challenges we've done the last 2 months, man. So it's awesome to have you on the 80/20 Real Estate Show.
Yeah, no, I appreciate you guys having me on. Yeah, it's been a really good year. Wholesaling in October, really fun event, and then of course LSU winning the national title. Go Tigers! Um, and also, yeah, appreciate the opportunity to be on, and really love what you guys did with the Fire Yourself Challenge. I don't think enough entrepreneurs out there kind of focus on those things, and in terms of making sure you're building a business that works for you versus working for your business. So really good stuff that you guys put together on that challenge. And if anybody hasn't gone to it, you definitely need to register for the next challenge.
Appreciate that, my man. Well, to give folks who aren't familiar with you, Charles, a little bit more insight, do we want to kind of start off maybe with an overview of everything you got going on? Right before we start hitting record, he was getting calls on his second computer. He's like a mad scientist back there with all his screens and monitors and everything going on. But yeah, do you kind of want to give an overview of what you're doing now before we talk about kind of your story and journey to where you're at now with your investing business?
Sure, absolutely. So, for those of you who don't know me, my name is Charles Nguyen. I'm out of the Houston, Texas. I run. Here's the way I characterize things: and what I tell people all the time is, if you are out there actually generating leads and going out and closing deals, whether you buy them yourself or you wholesale them, at the end of the day, you're kind of running a wholesaling business. I'm very big on lead generation and marketing. So I kind of naturally fell into wholesaling versus, I never thought I'd actually run a wholesaling business, but effectively I kind of am now. And kind of grew that up over the years, and we'll probably talk about that in a bit. But yeah, so I run a big lead gen business, wholesaling business, do rentals, and whatnot as well. And then, of course, last year stepped into a little bit of event planning. That it's the first real big event that we've done, but just something to kind of give back to the community. Other things I'm kind of involved with as well is kind of virtual assistants. Been sourcing some virtual assistants for some of my friends and some of other clients as well. And also doing a little bit of consulting as well in terms of helping people scale their business. So the event that we ran last year was called Wholesaling. So it's how to get people to scale up their businesses.
Yeah, man. And Charles, just to add on, he's being pretty modest. Charles talks and is friends with a lot of the top investors, wholesalers in the country, either from the event, personal coaching he does, or coaches that he has. So he brings a lot of experience and is also somebody who I met back in 2016 that was working a corporate job. I'll let you expand on the story here that will resonate with a lot of people and help a lot of people as far as building belief that they can do this. But he was just somebody that went from kind of a corporate background and doing this part-time to, scaling and, kind of what he was just describing, scaling and being able to step out of that corporate job and working all those crazy hours and really running more of the show and finding his unique talents and kind of understanding his personality, how his mind works, and reverse engineering that to his business. So you guys are definitely going to get some good insights today. We're going to talk mindset stuff as well as we do on every episode typically. But walk me through that a little bit, Charles, as far as what you're doing before real estate and kind of how you got in there. I know you alluded to that a little bit as you kind of fell backwards into wholesaling from the marketing and lead generation, research and development you were doing. But yeah, tell me a little bit about just like the corporate days and how you got into real estate.
Okay, yeah, sure. So kind of my background, if you can't tell by how I look or my last name, I'm Asian. So I grew up pretty much as any stereotypical Asian of my generation, which was go to school, get a good job, so that's what I did. and I ended up going the IT route. So for probably 17 years, I had an IT career, and kind of I did consulting, worked for a consulting company, and then I started working for investment banks. So while I was at investment banks, obviously, it's a bit of high stress because I was on the trading floor. Uh, at my last job, my responsibility was make sure traders could trade. So a little bit of high stress there, but at the end of the day, it kind of helped me with a lot of things in real estate, particularly when it pertains to how to handle people and situations. So while I was in corporate America, I mean, for the first, I don't know, probably 13, 14 years of my career, the only thing I was focused on was climbing the corporate ladder. And then at some point, I started realizing, well, I was working probably, at the time, probably somewhere between 80 to 90, sometimes 100 hours a week. Yeah, and it's a legitimate, right? When I said 100 hours a week, for me, right, we have 24/7 trading systems. So, yeah, we were on all the time. So then I started looking at different avenues to kind of do things besides just the 9 to 5. I looked at things from like franchises, going to open up businesses, all kinds of things, but everything kind of went back to real estate. And because, mind you, I worked on the trading floor, so I could kind of see what goes on when people talk about day trading. So I saw that aspect. I'm like, I can't compete with institutional traders. Institutional traders can move the market if they really wanted to. So real estate just started to make a whole lot of sense to me because of all the benefits, and just Google benefits of real estate, and you can figure all of that out. So then I started going down the path of, okay, let me go learn a lot more about real estate. And I originally was wanting to, probably like a lot of corporate guys like me, my goal was just go buy and hold, and then just go build up a big portfolio and just get X number of houses and go retire. But what I started finding was because of my nature, and I'm a pretty aggressive person, I couldn't wait for kind of wholesalers to bring me deals, just because there were so many of them out there, and I didn't honestly have the time to go process all of these deals that were coming through my mailbox. And then the majority of them weren't really good, so it became kind of like a waste of time. And if you know anything, then your time's the most valuable commodity you have. So after a little while of just looking at emails, I'm like, yeah, this doesn't make sense from a time perspective for me. So then I started getting into lead generation. I mean, how can I go get my own leads, get my own deals? So then with my kind of IT background and process oriented nature, then I started, building my systems so that I can do massive lead generation. And, so if there's kind of, different superpowers I have, then one of them is obviously technology, and the other one is putting in systems and processes. So then I just started building upon that. And then, we can get into my first hire, but after I hired my first person, then things just got a lot easier because I had someone who can actually do the work while I was still in corporate America. And for those of you, I mean, we'll probably talk about virtual assistants a bit later as well, maybe in this conversation. But for those of you who say that you can't get a VA to do X for you, I'd probably argue that you probably could, because my first virtual assistant hire pretty much ran my entire day-to-day operations while I was in corporate America. Granted, I put in systems and processes for them to actually be able to handle all of it. But once I put it in place, then they were off to the races. And, some days I'd collect checks and I wouldn't even know what property they were from. So I did that, and then just continued building my business. And then, I'd probably say 3.5 years after I started after I attended my first seminar. Then I left corporate America to kind of do this full time, and then I've just kind of been building and building since then. That also always say, I'm always learning as well, and I encourage everybody to continue learning. I'm going to training classes all the time. I met you and Dan at a training class in Phoenix.
Yeah.
3-4 years ago, and every time we see each other, it's usually at some training class.
Yeah. That's awesome, man. Could you go a little bit more specific into how you hired that first VA, what made you do so, and kind of more specific on the systems and processes and how you did that? Because I feel like a lot of people, they might have a VA, but I feel like that's always a subject to hit on. Maybe arguably the most featured topic that we get asked about is hiring. And a
Yeah.
lot of the times the easiest one is bringing on either virtual assistant and or something on the lead generation, marketing, lead qualification side is kind of the first avenue that someone would bring on a hire.
Yeah, no, sure. So for me, this was probably back in maybe it was probably around 2015 or so. It was several years ago, 5 years ago, where I was basically a one-man show. I was doing all of the work, all the marketing, all the calls, going out to houses, going to sell the houses. Everything relied on me. And like most real estate investors, and the stories you hear is, always make sure you're marketing, because if you stop marketing because you're dealing with a deal, then you will be months in between deals. And that's kind of how I started when I first was in real estate. Was, I get a deal and then I drop everything and go do that deal. And then, a couple months later is when I go get the next deal, because you're too busy dealing with the one deal that you have. So that's a reason why you have to outsource. I know my personality type, which a lot of entrepreneurs have too, because I've talked to a lot of entrepreneurs in the past couple of weeks about outsourcing. And the mentality is always that, I can outsource, but, I'm afraid to. I can do it better than they can. What if they mess up? Those fears are there, but I will tell you, the minute you can let go of that, then the minute your business can propel. So for me, I was in the same boat, because, I was like, well, I can do things pretty fast. It might take me too long to explain it to somebody. But what kind of hit me was every day from about, I'd get home and, do stuff with the family. They would go to sleep at 9 o'clock. So from 9 o'clock to 2 o'clock every morning, then that's when I was doing my real estate stuff. And, after a while, that gets kind of tiring. And I remember specifically one week for 3 days in a row, the same thing would happen to me every night. It was about 10 o'clock, and I'm like, hey, what do I work on right now? Do I work on marketing, sending out the next set of direct mail? Do I work on what the title company is asking me for? Or do I put together an offer for a seller that I talked to? So for 3 nights, that's what I did. And every night I was just getting more and more upset, because I was just had too much to do. And then on that last night, I was finally like, I remember reading an email probably 5 times, because I couldn't understand it the first 4 times. And this was probably like 1 o'clock in the morning. So as you get tired, you just start to not understand things. So at that point, I was like, I just got to hire somebody. So then I set in motion the process to go actually hire somebody. And for me, I was going to hire a virtual assistant, because that was just kind of easier for me. And I ended up going with a managed service, because they took care of a lot of infrastructure that I didn't have. The biggest things are, number one, they went out and, they had candidate pools already. They had people they had already on their staff ready for me to interview. So I didn't have to go through putting up job posting ads. I didn't have to go vet these people, because in some cases, So people just, it's kind of hard to go through the interview process if you haven't done it before. The other thing they took care of was making sure that timesheets and payroll and that type of thing was all taken care of, as well as make sure that the VA would show up to work. So I ended up hiring someone from a service, and I will tell you the thing that anybody who hires a VA will always think of in the beginning is they don't give them enough to do, in the sense that they sometimes shelter their virtual assistant and don't want them to fail. So they don't give them, they think that they want to hold back in terms of what they think the VA is capable of, where I'm here to tell you VAs are people as well. So they're capable of doing whatever you can train somebody to do. You'd be surprised, because I know when I first started, I just needed someone to make calls for me, because I just wasn't able to make all the calls that I needed to, because I can only do it during breaks, lunch, at nights, or on weekends. So once I hired that person, then they started making some of those calls. And even me at the beginning, I was a little hesitant to have them make calls, just because of, of the mindset of, oh, what if they mess up? All right. I make the same mistakes I see other people make. And I'm here to tell you, try not to make these. So very quickly, probably, at first I was like, maybe within, 2 weeks, you can start making some phone calls for me. But after the first 2 or 3 days of kind of getting them up to speed, I was like, no, they need to take this on right now. And so I pushed up the whole timeline in terms of when they can actually start making calls for me. And I will tell you, that's kind of one of the best things I ever did, because she picked it up and she just kept on going. And, that freed up a whole lot of my time. So once she got comfortable with that, then I also started building a whole bunch of processes and systems around what she needed to do. So I use Podio. So being an IT guy, then I can kind of make some updates to my Podio system to kind of do whatever I needed to do. And, after a while, if you have good folks, they'll also give you recommendations on what to do. Because for a while there, every day she would, not every day, but probably every other day, she'd come to me and say, hey, can we do this? All right. Can you get me a button that does this? For those of you familiar with Podio, right? Adding a button's pretty easy. Just putting the code behind it to do what you want. That's a little bit of a different story. So I put in place things, processes and systems for her to follow. And, anytime if there was something new, then she would either ask me, or, a lot of times I tell her to make a judgment call and just say, hey, as long as you can justify why you did what you did, I'm good. And, that's how people learn. I don't want to hold them back and have everything wait on me. Otherwise, business doesn't get done. And if she would have made a decision that I would have done slightly differently, I would just said, hey, here's what I would have done next time in that case. Because one thing, as you work with virtual assistants, that you want to make sure you're doing is give them responsibility. Let them own things. Not all of them want to just come to work and just kind of punch buttons. They want to come in, they want to see you grow, because, they're just people like anybody else, even in the US. That's one thing, everybody in the audience should know is, even if they're in the Philippines, South America, Mexico, wherever, they're people, and treat them definitely like people, not just third world citizens. And you'd be surprised at what they'd be able to do for you.
That's kind of the 2 points that I'm picking up is, one, maybe one of the biggest common mistakes around VA is a little bit of fear of giving them too much work to do, not putting enough on their plate when really they can't handle it. The same way with our remote employees, whether they're in Philippines or Mexico, wherever. And the second thing is kind of giving them, I like how you explain it, of giving them the responsibility and just say, hey, if you can justify it, it's good with me.
Well,
Kind of
no,
like those 2 points there.
I know. I mean, you'd kind of be surprised because I mean, they will value it if you kind of give them opportunity to make decisions, and let them own it. And you know, because I treat them actually very similar to how I treated people in corporate America. I had a lot of managers work for me in corporate America as well, and I kind of did the same things with them, which is, hey, this is your team. I'm going to let you make decisions. If I won't let you make a decision that will basically jeopardize the entire team, but I'm okay with letting you make decisions that won't kill everything else. Basically, I'll give them enough rope to where they can um, have some decisions. But if and I'll even let them run down a path that I don't necessarily agree with, as long as it's not going to be truly detrimental. And I've even let my folks make HR and employee type decisions like that as well, because a lot of people, it's just human nature. They when they experience these things, then they will learn much better than if somebody were to just tell them. So
Mhm.
I let them go down the path of, maybe not necessarily the same exact decision I would have made. However, I just let them run with it. And, we just have conversations later about, okay, what would you do differently next time?
Love it. That was back in 2015, 2016. You hired that original VA. Is she still with you today?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
That's awesome, dude. Damn,
Yeah.
that fires
Yeah.
me up. Let's talk a little bit hiring just to go into this, and I'm going to loop back to a couple specific type questions or a little bit of areas. But that is amazing, dude. 5 years, around 5 years, having the same VA. What type of hires did you continue to make on from there? I know you have a bunch of VAs today. And then kind of like what was your mindset or process of analyzing that? Because I know we're big on doing like a freedom focuser template where you kind of lay out however many hours you're spending in a day, week, and kind of categorizing them by, all right, this is on marketing, this is on lead generation, this is on hiring, this is on talking to sellers, it's on buyers, et cetera, et cetera. So I'd love to hear kind of your mindset on how you went from this original VA who started calling for you and you got her rocking and rolling. And then as you started growing out and deciding where you needed more help at.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So this VA, she kind of ran a lot of my operations. Like, I mean, she pretty much ran kind of day to day. I
Mhm.
took care of a lot of the marketing because that's an aspect I kind of enjoyed, but kind of all the lead management and whatnot. Then she took care of pretty much any seller that came through my organization. Was at some point talking to her. And then as I started to scale a little bit, then it just depends on what I was looking for at the time. And for me, I'm really heavy on lead gen, so lead generation. So I'm always looking for people who I can slot into some to go generate leads. And some of those things that you'll need are lead managers. Now in the world of telemarketing, then there's cold calling, for those of you who are sending SMS, and then SMS as well. One thing I will tell people, when I talk to people about virtual assistants or even hiring in general, is make sure you're hiring the right person for the right job. So, for instance, someone who's a kind of an admin person, then they may or may not be the best person to be your lead gen person, because they're going to have to talk to sellers on the phone. Whereas, someone who's building lists for you or whatnot, or kind of doing paperwork, doing some types of transaction coordinating for you, they need good communication skills, but it's a little different than if you're negotiating with sellers. So, and that also is a difference between, like, I've got folks who do lead management. They're good with the sellers, but I don't expect them to do hard negotiations with sellers. Um, uh, can you train them to? Yes, because even my lead managers do some basic negotiations. But my thing with lead managers are, hey, they just got to constantly be following up with people all day long. Because sure, you guys talk about it all the time too, is the money's in the follow-up.
Mm-hmm.
And then you got other folks who, let's just say you're doing telemarketing, let's just say you're doing SMS, then right, that might be a slightly different skill set. They may not need to be able to speak English as well, but they definitely need to be able to read and write it very well. And the other thing is, what I found with kind of like SMS is, you want those type of folks to make sure they're detail oriented, because SMS, it's to me, SMS is just a process. You just especially if you're doing volume, it's just, how can I get through these conversations with some basic negotiation. You don't need to be like a FBI negotiator to do texting. You just need to do some basics that you can get done. And to me, I'm always the way I decide on how to scale is, I like to push things to the point where they kind of break, and then taper back the marketing, and then figure out, do I need to hire more, or do I need to tweak something?
Cool. So that's kind of like a guiding principle. The last sentence that you said there, that's kind of like a guiding principle for your decision making as far as when and whether or not to bring on a hire. It's kind of like pushing it, almost stretching that particular process or system thin until it breaks, and bringing somebody on. To what extent you're comfortable with, Charles, would you mind kind of going into your process for hiring as far as putting, like, doing the lead gen for finding a potential hire, whether it's a VA or somebody else, running them through an interview? Because I know like companies like Rocket Station, we work with a good bit and refer people out. They're great because they'll actually show you how to make standard operating procedures and documentation of different sorts, and they kind of manage some of the VAs for you. So that's definitely going to be a great choice for a lot of you listening to this, because you're pretty much outsourcing to a company like Rocket Station, handling of the interview, the advertisements, collecting a pool of virtual assistants or remote employees that you could potentially pick from. So where Charles is at now, it probably makes more sense with his experience too, to kind of take that part back for, maybe some benefits that he would tell you. But I kind of see it as either or, where you bring on a company like Rocket Station, where you're pretty much hiring them to do a good part of that, or where Charles is about to expand a little bit now, where he's kind of doing that all in-house. Maybe you have some VA help doing that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So I think a lot of you who are out there who are trying to figure out, do you do it yourself or you hire a company? I think it all boils down to time. Do you have the time to go figure out how to do it? Or would you rather spend the money and have someone basically take care of that for you, and then you figure out later what to do? So in my case, in the beginning, I didn't have time. So I was more than happy to have a service kind of take care of all this stuff for me. Nowadays, I do all the hiring in-house. And as a matter of fact, my VAs actually take care of all the hiring for me. I just tell them, hey, here's how many I want, and here's what I want them to do. And then they go off and kind of do it. The example I kind of give is last year I went to Orlando for 2 weeks, to Disney World and a mastermind. And before I left, I was like, hey, we need 2 more lead gen people. They're like, okay, we got it. And then I come back 2 weeks later, we got 2 lead gen people who are on staff. So they kind of take care of all of that. And I'll kind of walk you through their process. And I had to kind of help them put in that process to begin with, but now they kind of pretty much run it, because it's kind of like what you guys have taught in the Fire Yourself Challenge. As an entrepreneur and a business owner, we have to kind of put in the processes and the systems, but then find the right people to actually run them. So kind of the process that we use is probably the process that anyone can use if they're doing it themselves, which is, put together the job posting. Make sure you're very clear on what you want the person to do. The more clear you are, a little bit better the results. Because, for instance, right, if you want somebody to do cold calling, then make sure that your job description says cold calling. Otherwise, they show up the first day and they thought they're doing lead management when in fact they're doing cold calling. That's a completely different job type. So get the job descriptions properly done, and then post them in different forums. So, for instance, online jobs.ph. You could also look at Upwork. The one benefit that I have, because my VAs do it, is they have access to kind of the different social media groups, like Facebook groups out in the Philippines. So they can post in their native language or whatnot in places that I don't even know about. But they just go post, and they do the screening. They ask their standard questions to kind of vet out. Here's the one thing that I've realized when I was as I've hired quite a number of virtual assistants is, for me, hiring someone in the US is relatively easy, in the sense that when I was in corporate America, I'd walk into an interview when I'm interviewing somebody, and usually within 2 to 3 minutes, I could pick out how this person would or would not fit in the role that I was looking for, because I was hyper focused on, right, I needed somebody for the trading floor. So I knew what I needed, and I could generally tell within 2 minutes whether the person would be a fit or not. The one thing when you cross cultural boundaries is that I found out that it's a little bit different when you're crossing cultures, because it's a little harder for me to pick up some of the cultural nuances that, let's just say, somebody in the Philippines has. Whereas if I had my VAs do it, who are from the Philippines, then they can pick up on these cultural things that I may not. So, that's why as soon as I kind of relinquished the interview process to them, then it actually not only saved me a ton of time, but it just made the process a lot better. Because I know there was some cases where, I'll also say, if there was an issue with a virtual assistant, I will always say the fault lies in the mirror, right? Look in the mirror, and that's where the fault is. Even when, not every virtual assistant I've had has worked out, but all the ones lately definitely have, because I've shifted the way I do it. Whereas before it was, I was kind of doing it my way, and, some of the cultural tendencies just didn't work out. And, as you bring people on pretty quick, then, some of my VAs would tell me, hey, so-and-so's got these kind of little things that might be an issue. And next thing you know, yeah. So that's why I say, right, if you have an issue with a virtual assistant, yeah, you just got to make sure, look at yourself first, make sure you're providing the right instructions and you did it right. So anyways, kind of going back to the process. Yeah. So my VAs actually handle all the hiring process now. So it makes my job a heck of a lot easier. And given kind of how my team operates, my VAs have a vested interest to make sure anybody we bring on is good quality as well, because it's going to impact their workload as well.
I love that. Are they deep enough in the company decision making where they tell you where hey Charles, hey boss, we may need a hire here, or is that kind of daily CEO Charles saying, hey, we need to hire here, and then that just gets outsourced to them? Do they have any input as far as like when you may need to bring on another VA or another hire?
So that's a good question, and I'll kind of answer it this way. Yes, they do have input, and here's the thing. Here's the thing I do all the time with my virtual assistants, and I make it a point to do this every time a new person starts. Is I reiterate the fact that I want their input all the time. Meaning, I want them to say, "Hey, we can do this better." Or why don't we do things this way? Because I'm not in the trenches every day. They are. Who's the best people to say, hey, there's a better way to do something? Is the people actually doing the work. Me, where I'm a little removed from things, where I don't do certain things on a day-to-day basis, then I may not be the best person to say how to do something. I may have an idea, but someone doing things day in, day out would have a much better idea of how to do something than me. Like, for instance, even today, one of my VAs who takes care of some of the marketing for me in lead gen, she's like, hey, this doesn't seem to be working very well. I'm going to change. I'm going to make some tweaks. I'm like, go for it, right? Go for it and let me know how it works. And if you need me to dive in deep and look at something, let me know. She's like, no, I just want to let you know what I'm about to go do. Again, it goes back to empower your people to do their jobs, and have some mechanism to review kind of what they're doing. But the more you can give them, the more they take ownership as well. I mean, it's just and then that's less you have to do.
Mm-hmm. You might be amazed by what happens the more ownership opportunities you give them.
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, they'll love it. They'll feel a part of the culture. I mean, that to me, that's a huge thing, especially when you have virtual assistants, especially when you start having large teams of virtual assistants who all work from home. Because pretty much everybody, all my virtual assistants, they work from home. So it's the middle of the night for them. They're probably the only person up in their household. So they don't really get to talk to a whole lot of people other than, potential sellers or other real estate people. The other people they get to talk to is each other. So make sure you build a really good culture to where they want to come in and work every day. Because I think, if anything, I know my team, they have fun. They, even though it's kind of in a virtual setting, they do things to make sure that it's kind of festive.
Yeah, that's guiding principle, life principle for me. Number one is always have fun, and I let everything trickle down from there. I think it's funny and interesting as a IT guy, consulting guy, data guy. You really hit on a lot of qualitative aspects that makes you successful in real estate, which is cool to
Yeah,
see.
I know. I mean, I would, you know, I think, I mean, yes, I'm very system and process oriented, but I think, they always say, right, real estate's a people business. Uh, so at the end of the day, who's the most important people in your business? It's the ones who are working in it. So make sure you take care of all of them, whether they're a virtual assistant or there's somebody sitting next to you. You take care of them, and then they'll take care of you. Right. At the end of the day, you want to build a good, loyal team who, they'll just work really, really hard for you. Because in corporate America, I built teams that, right, we were on the trading floor, so I was calling people up at 2 a.m. Um, but my team picked up because they knew I was going to try to take care of, and we always took care of each other. Same thing in your own business. Take care of them, and they'll take care of you.
Love it. I guess tech/resource question. What kind of tools do you use, throughout your real estate career and maybe even currently for documenting systems, having processes inside your business, everything like that? Because that's a flashy
Mm-hmm.
term,
Yeah.
systems, processes, documentation. To actually get like the specific type tech or resources, what are you using right now to keep everybody in your company, or like if you need to do something, record something, what are you using?
Okay. Yeah, no, that's a good point. So let me just drop, right. So everybody, if you write anything down, write this down. Because this will be your for sure $1 million idea or $1 million tip that will save you a whole bunch of time. So when I was building my real estate business while doing corporate America, systems and processes were very important to me. Everybody says go document your processes. I will tell you the same thing. Go document your processes. But what's the issue? The issue is I don't have time to document my processes. So I'll tell you exactly how I did mine, which is I recorded everything I wanted done. So even to this day, I do the same thing. If I want, let's just say I want a virtual assistant to kind of do some tasks, then I use Screencast-O-Matic, which is it's an online tool. I like it because it's free, up to 15-minute video. By the way, if your video is longer than 15 minutes, it's too long. Your standard operating procedure video should be, for me, 2 to 5 minutes at most. You just want to explain what needs to get done. So I recorded whatever I wanted to get done. And then I handed it off to virtual assistants, and they run through the process just based on the documentation. They're not allowed to ask me questions. If they ask me a question, then I didn't explain something right. Beyond the fact that, okay, what's the username and password or something like that. But normally the way I give them information, I'm giving a video and every resource that they need. From there, they execute those steps. If they can execute it properly, then great, right? Then the next step is they document the process based on my video. And then, bless you. And then the next step would be, if you have a large enough team, then you get another person who just from the video and the documentation, they need to be able to execute those steps. And if they can, then your documentation and video is great. If they have to ask a question, then something in the process is not right. And then, you just make little tweaks here or there. So, in terms of where to document your standard operating procedures, you can use things like, I like sites.google.com, the classic version. There's a new version out there, but I kind of like the classic version. You can also use Google Docs. For me, I like things online because then anybody can get to it, especially in a virtual environment. Yeah, and I know a lot of people print out their standard operating procedures, but sometimes those get outdated, a week after they're written. So move it online. If you want to get to some fancier tools, then you can use things like Process Street, or I think another one's called Sweet Process. But either way, have it written down somewhere. But the key point is record videos on everything that you're doing, and there's no reason if you have virtual assistants not to have your virtual assistants actually write your documentation for you. Then
that gets me fired up.
Yeah.
Just talking about that. No, but some good nuggets. So I mean, if you're doing videos that are over 15 minutes long, they're probably too long. And I love the idea of quick 2-3 minute videos. And maybe if you're recording those on something free like Loom or Screencast-O-Matic, you give them a format of how to put that into a Google Doc, where you give them a heading format, bullet points, what they're going to learn in this video, and you just hand them the video and say, hey, study this, put this into a doc. That's great stuff there. So the tools mentioned were Screencast-O-Matic. Loom is one that I personally use too. It's like a Google Chrome extension that you can use. That's pretty cool. Sites.google.com. Charles prefers the classic version to the newer version. Google Docs, again, is free. And then some paid options would be Process Street and Sweet Process. So definitely some good resources there. I want to ask you a question that we may even be regurgitating or saying again from your answer, but if you were hired on as a consultant, and let's say this is a real estate investing company that has some experience, they're doing consistent transactions, and we'll just say wholesale for the sake of this example. What's kind of the first things that you would be looking to do and analyze with your background and strengths and personality type? What kind of things would you do at the start working as a consultant with an experienced wholesaling company?
Yeah. Okay. So let me give you kind of an example as well, because I did this for a client recently, where he's doing a consistent volume, but wanted to ramp it up some more. He was kind of running it like he had a little bit of help, but was still doing probably too much on his own. So the first thing we did was kind of take a look at all of his processes and seeing what was his biggest pain point like right now. And his biggest pain point was analyzing deals. So what we did was actually place a virtual assistant for him, had someone working on his team where now they're analyzing all these deals for him throughout the day. So instead of him having them pile up all day until 6, 7 o'clock at night when he got home, then they were getting processed throughout the day and kind of more in real time. And that saved him a ton of time. And just like the conversation we started with or had earlier about, people not giving their virtual assistant enough to do in the sense of kind of shielding them from doing too many different things. He was kind of in the same boat as well. So I had to have the conversations with him about, hey, they are capable people. You just got to give them training and they will be able to pick it up. And, it may take 1 or 2 times to kind of explain it, obviously, right? But they're capable of picking these things up. The other thing I helped him with as well is look at some of his tools and processes. So for instance, he was using a combination of Google spreadsheets to kind of move. He didn't really have a CRM per se. He was moving things from kind of one tab to the next tab to the next tab. And I made a quick suggestion on, how we can set all this up. And we decided on Trello because for him, Trello was going to work a little bit easier. So he now has a Trello board where he can move people through the different stages of his client lifecycle. He didn't need something too crazy just yet because some people aren't heavy on technology. So I found something that was good for him at this time. Now, and pretty shortly here, we might have to move him up to something like InvestorFuse, where is going to be much heavier volume. But his business kind of runs slightly differently. He doesn't need that just yet. Even though he's doing high volume, he doesn't work that way just yet. He gets some very, very good leads, so he doesn't need a high volume right now. Plus, we're trying to get him staffed up and process oriented so that he can actually flow more through his pipeline right now.
Very cool. So you're kind of, for that specific example and maybe overarching for what you would do if we just picked somebody out of a hat that was listening to this interview, you kind of go in and kind of prod for some pain points, check to see if there's any type of like tech efficiencies that can be done. And then of course you're helping them or getting them system and process oriented. So they have like a nice foundation to build on and just bring hires on.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Cause the goal for him is get to the point where he has this business running where he's not actually even involved because he's just in a really good position. But he doesn't have the time to actually to do all of the work. So the goal is to put people in place for him, and then that business is going to kind of run on its own.
Love it. That is the dream for a lot of folks. I want to pivot, Charles, a little bit because I know you're a big mindset guy and personal optimization guy. I want to touch on kind of a couple points. One was interesting on the Real Estate Disruptors podcast, which was close to a year ago, talking about growing up Asian and kind of like expectations. I think the example that you gave was you brought home a homework assignment and got 100 on it. And your dad was like, "Oh, what's wrong? What happened? They didn't give extra credit. Like, why did you only get a 100?" And I know that you're a very involved father, which is awesome to see. That's like one of the things that fires me up the most, seeing awesome parents. So I kind of want to hear from your perspective because I'm a big believer, even before everything of where the country is at now. I'm really a big believer that you can learn from every single person you come in contact with, even if it's just gain perspective. And that kind of just snowballs so you can kind of understand people as a whole. So I'd love to hear kind of like your perspective on that, which it's kind of went to a little bit already on this interview, but your perspective on that, how that kind of molded you, and then what you have kind of been doing on the personal development side, where you're this super successful guy, have a loving family, which is kind of a dream for a lot of people that get into this business or entrepreneurship in general.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So, I'll kind of sum it up real quick of how I grew up, and how I came out of that. And mind you, I didn't know. I've done a lot of self-reflection in probably the last maybe year and a half. So it's not like I've known this all my life. It's
Mm-hmm.
literally in the last year and a half that I've kind of figured a lot of this stuff out. Is that um, I'm a firm believer that we are the way we are because of how we grew up.
Mm-hmm.
And we've talked a little bit about it in previous conversations. And you know, I grew up in a family that's like, hey, right, go get better, go be the best at everything that you're doing. And that's just how I grew up. All right, got good grades in school, blah 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 blah. Unfortunately, I didn't become a doctor or a lawyer like every Asian parent wants their kids to be. My brother became one, so at least somebody in the family became a doctor. Uh, I was always geared to go be the best, go be a perfectionist, and that's how I even grew up in corporate America. Is I was always pushing to get better, be the best. Everything kind of had to be perfect. The one lesson I would probably tell all entrepreneurs is done is way better than perfect. Because there's plenty of times I look back now and things that I spent way too much time on that I probably shouldn't have even, not to say they're not important things, but it's more important that they got done than it looking perfect. And I'll give some quick examples is, especially for anybody who's starting out. Yes, like business cards are important, logos are important, but don't spend a whole week trying to figure out logos and business cards because chances are 3 months from now you may not like what you spent a whole
Mm-hmm.
week on. Go focus on things. I always go back to what our buddy Nick Perry says. Go focus on things that will that will go generate revenue. Get the cash register to ring.
Mm-hmm.
So focus on those things. Whereas I know I've been guilty of just trying to make everything perfect before I roll anything out. That's just always kind of been in my nature, but I've had to kind of let some of that stuff go, which is like, hey, it's not going to be perfect. I'm always aiming to try and be perfect, but I'd rather get things done than wait for something to be perfect because it's kind of like analysis paralysis. It's almost even worse. Um, you know, just make sure things are moving constantly. Um, so that's what I would encourage everybody. Not everything's going to be done perfectly, but you just have to keep on moving ahead. It's just like virtual assistants. Yeah, they might not get it 100% exactly how you would do it or as fast as you would do it per se. But if they can get 80% of the way that you would, that's a home run in
Mm-hmm.
my mind. So yeah, I mean, I think we're all um, how you are now is a result of how you were when you were younger. That influences you a lot, and that's also not to say that you can't change because I've had major transformation probably in the last, like I said, year and a half. And it's just a result of kind of actually slowing down and um, being present and thinking about things honestly. Whereas before I was on the go all the time, so there was no time to sit back and reflect on things. You know, the other thing I probably tell people as well, all entrepreneurs, we're hard charged, so we don't take time to stop and think about what we've accomplished. We're always kind of chasing the next thing. So just make sure you take a little bit of time to reflect on where you've been and what you've accomplished.
Mm-hmm.
Don't rest on your laurels, but just enjoy the process. Because I mean, like this year, this year's been kind of wonky all over the place. Who knows how the rest of the year will turn out? But maybe it's a good time for people to just reflect on, hey, um, you know, I've come a long way, and be proud of what you've done. And if you're not exactly where you want to be, that's okay. You still have today to start working on where you want to be tomorrow. So just enjoy the moment. And my moniker this year has been to be free, which is just do what you want to do, and don't get held back by any preconceived notions or anybody else's opinions of anything. And don't necessarily compare yourself to other people too, is what I'd also advise. Yeah, there's a lot of people doing lots of business all over the place. Just use that as motivation to try and get there. Don't beat yourself up because you're not there yet.
Mm-hmm. Who would have thought in 2016 when we first linked up in Arizona, you'd be hosting one of the biggest wholesaling events a few years later?
I didn't. I would have not guessed that either. And even that event came about pretty quickly. And I'll just drop this in there real quick because I always talk about go big, and there's no reason why you can't go big and think big. So that event we put on Wholesaling, start to finish, was less than 100 days to pull it all together.
That's crazy.
So when people talk about doing impossible stuff, I look back at that and I'm like someday I'm like, how did that get done?
Yeah.
we didn't even, I don't even think we announced the event until 67 days or something like that before the event. So anything's possible.
Yeah, absolutely, man. Charles is a very modest guy. He's definitely a big thinker. Talks about targeting 80 million single family houses. So he's a very modest guy, and appreciative of your time, which you say, as many of the smartest people in the world say, is your most valuable asset. To wrap on the personal development type stuff before we kind of put a bow on this thing and close it out, I'm curious what kind of stuff that you do with your children, as far as you clearly know and realize, again, like a lot of the smartest people, that those are your most transformative years, as a child, kind of how you're wired and programmed. So I'm curious just kind of how you, as a father, kind of just, father wise, what type of stuff you do with your children and kind of your relationship with them in regards to how intentionally wiring them for thinking big and abundance and being able to be free and telling them anything's possible.
Oh yeah, no, absolutely. So I'll also kind of say, I was your prototypical corporate guy where I was just working to climb the ladder. So kind of, when I was still in corporate America, especially before I found real estate, then I was always working, and I was, one of those guys who I wasn't at home and present very much, even if I was at home. I look back at that, I'm like, yeah, that's not very good. I know why I did it at the time, but there's still no excuse, just make sure you're present with your kids, because, they grow up really fast. So things I do with my kids now, I try to, they're different personalities. So you almost have to treat them a little bit differently. Like my daughter is actually very similar to me. So I don't know if that's a good or bad thing, but she's very similar to me. So I kind of almost exactly know how she is. But one of the things that I've kind of gotten her onto is, sometimes, when I will push her to do certain things, like I'll push her to read books. And then, so she's read a couple books, but then I also realized that reading, she'd rather not read. So I switched her over to podcasts. So one of the podcasts that I have her listening to now is Ed Milet.
Nice.
And so and partly I moved her over to him because I know he normally does interviews. So it's a lot of talking about people's stories and kind of how they grew up, and it's more of stories versus reading text, because my daughter, she likes hearing stories. So I'm pushing her to kind of do that. My son, he's a outgoing type of guy. So one of the things that he's in, which I highly recommend actually everybody get their kids into, is scouting. You know, I knew nothing about scouting before, probably 2, 3 years ago when my son started. But I will tell you that you learn some serious lessons in there, and just stuff that I would have probably never taught my son if I didn't go through scouting, where it's a very structured process, and I highly recommend.
What is that, like Boy Scouts?
Yeah, Boy
Oh, Boy Scout.
Scouts.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah, it's actually, I mean, very kind of, you know, definitely, I know within the scouting group that we're in, it's really well run and kind of structured, and he gets to interact with a bunch of other kids his age and kind of doing the same thing. So they do make it kind of fun. Um, you know, whether he makes it to Eagle Scout or not, I mean, we'll kind of see over the next couple of years to see if he really enjoys it. So far, he loves it. So we had a virtual scout camp earlier today. So gets him pretty active. And of course my son does other little things. He's been teaching me about Fortnite this summer.
Nice. Very cool. Yeah, it's funny, and that's cool that your daughter likes podcasts and just storytelling. I mean, that's kind of like the most ancient or most tried way of conveying information is like storytelling, whether it's like the Bible or any type of like religion, is all kind of like storytelling that's lasted thousands and thousands of years. So that's why I think humans are kind of wired to resonate with stories and kind of like internalize those best versus reading necessarily out of a book. For some people, it's just like straight up text or information. But that's cool, man. I do want to ask any closing words or advice, and then definitely want to get your Instagram, any type of social where people can follow you, and any resources that you may have to share with anybody listening.
Wow. I mean, just final thoughts. I mean, I would probably tell everyone that everything is possible. You just have to dream it, believe it, and then go execute. And one thing I would probably also say is that if you don't know how to do something, then just go reach out to people. Go take classes. Go find people who are already doing it. Go work with them. Go do whatever you got to do, but don't let something hold you back from achieving whatever it is that you want to do. Because life's kind of short, and we just got to go quickly to go wherever we want to go. And I'd also say be comfortable with whatever you want to do. And my moniker, like I said, this year is kind of be free. And the other thing that we all, I think, need to be working on is just being present in the moment. Because I'm guilty, like most people. I used to be heads down on my phone all the time when I'm out anywhere. So just be present and enjoy the process and enjoy the journey.
Love it, man. What is the best place, I guess, to follow you on Instagram, any type of social, Facebook, anything like that, and then any resources you might have?
Okay, cool. Yeah, so you can find me on Instagram. Is at Best Real Charles. You can, yeah, that'll probably be a good place to find me. You can also catch me on Facebook as well. You can just search for my name and I'll come up. One resource people ask me all the time about is kind of what KPIs I have I track for my virtual assistants. So if anybody wants it, they can go to bestrealsystem.com, and they can just put in their information and we'll email it over to you. So that's bestrealsystem.com.
Awesome. Very appreciative of your most valuable asset and your time and your wisdom and sharing your story. The most ancient way to transfer information that's able to help some people listening to this. So thank you so much, dude. Greatly appreciated. Guys, I hope you enjoyed this episode. Definitely follow Charles on Instagram. He's getting more and more involved on there, which is awesome, at bestrealcharles on Instagram. So have a great day, guys. Hope you enjoyed the interview.